Hello, my name is Olga Cardamone, and I'm the founder and CEO of Eagle Travel Tours to Russia. In my previous video, I shared with you that because of the coronavirus, I'm staying home right now, just like a lot of my guests, and that's why I decided to start this YouTube channel. Because I think a lot of our guests are thinking of Russia. Maybe you had a trip to Russia planned and it got canceled because of the quarantine, or maybe you've been to Russia already and you are thinking about it and remembering how your trip went. Anyway, I figured that if I can't bring people to Russia right now, why not bring Russia to people? By the way, my husband and I moved to California in 2016, and I've been running this company from California for the last almost 4 years. It gives me lots of different advantages, including the fact that I can get visas for our clients over here. But also, another thing that it gives me is the fact that I know really well different American streaming services. And I know what movies and shows about Russia are available to people right now. So I figured now, since we're stuck at home, we're watching a lot of TV anyway. Maybe some of you have thought about learning something about Russia right now, and I wanted to share with you my list of favorite movies and TV shows about Russia. They don't have to be Russian, but the things that are available right now on the most common American streaming services. The first one is a show. It's available on Hulu, and it's War and Peace. It's an adaptation of Leo Tolstoy's famous novel. In Russia, kids actually have to read the whole novel as part of their high school curriculum, and you can imagine that it's huge and most people don't actually read it. And in Russia, we joke that when high school kids read War and Peace, girls skip straight to the romance parts and boys skip to the battle descriptions. Anyway, when I read War and Peace in high school, I also did a lot of skipping. But when I read it as an adult, I really enjoyed it. However, it took a really long time. Therefore, when I talk to my guests about Russian literature, I often recommend that instead of spending a really long time reading War and Peace, which is awesome too, and if you want to do it, you should. But if you don't have that much time to read this book, you should really watch that show, War and Peace, on Hulu. It's made beautifully. I always really enjoy watching it. They actually went to Russia to shoot it, and a lot of the show takes place in one of my most favorite palaces in St. Petersburg. Those of you who have been, or maybe have done your research about Russia, might have heard about the Yusupov Palace. This palace belonged to the Yusupovs, which was the richest aristocratic family in the Imperial Russia. And because they were so wealthy, they decorated their palace beautifully, even though it was their private home. But it has gorgeous interiors, ballrooms, dining rooms. It even has a private theater. So War and Peace, part of War and Peace, was shot at that palace. And those of you who have been there, you'll definitely recognize some of the rooms. Anyway, the acting in the show is incredible too. I love Paul Dano as Pierre and Lily James as Natasha. I really highly recommend this show. If you like shows or movies that are set at that time and look beautifully, just like War and Peace, and if you also like Leo Tolstoy, I also recommend another movie that can be found on Netflix. It's the adaptation of Leo Tolstoy's Anna Karenina. This movie is the one with Keira Knightley and Jude Law, and I remember that when I watched it for the first time, I didn't love it because it's a little bit too stylized. It was a little bit too stylized for me back then. And I found that it wasn't exactly like the novel. However, right now, I've seen it a couple more times and I like it. It definitely creates this beautiful mood. And if what you like about Russia is the extravagance and the era of gorgeous balls and royal palaces, then you will definitely like this movie. I highly recommend watching it, just don't take it seriously. Anyway, if you want to learn more about the royal palaces and the beautiful era, another show that I highly recommend is called The Romanovs, and that show can be found on Amazon Prime Video. This show has 8 episodes, and it's centered around people who believe themselves to be the descendants of the Romanov family. A lot of the show is set in the modern day, and it was created by the same people who made Mad Men. So you can see Christina Hendricks in there, for example. You can also see Diane Lane. And this show is super entertaining. Some of the episodes are a little bit strange, but definitely this is really entertaining TV. And if you want to learn more about the Romanovs, our royal family, another great TV that I can recommend is the show on Netflix called The Last Czars. This show is centered around the last Russian Tsar, Nicholas II, and he had just such a fascinating story because he never planned to be a Russian Tsar. He never planned to rule the country. He just had a dream of having a quiet life and a family. But the way life happened was that he had to become the Russian Tsar. And it was just really unfortunate time for him. And as you know, he ended up being murdered by the Bolsheviks during the revolution, together with his whole family, including his wife and 5 children. But this was just such a fascinating period in Russian history, and you can really learn a lot by watching this show. I think that it's a great intro into the 20th century in Russian history. If you are more interested in something more modern, something that covers modern Russian history, I can recommend 2 things. Number one is a documentary, Oscar-nominated documentary called Icarus, which can be found on Netflix. It is about the drug scandal with the Russian Olympic team. Quite interesting. And the other piece is a show on HBO called Chernobyl. You might have heard about it already. It was quite popular when it came out, and that show is just so incredible. It's centered around the Chernobyl nuclear accident that happened in the USSR in the 80s. And the reason I highly recommend watching this show is that not only do you learn a lot about Russian history, and this was a really important event in the world history, I think, but you also really get a great insight into what life in the Soviet Union was like back then in the 80s. A lot of people who lived in Russia in the 80s and watched that show mentioned that it's incredible how accurately their life was shown in that show. For example, in the way that apartments are furnished, or in the clothes that people were wearing, the food they were eating. Anyway, if you watch that show, you really get to learn what life was like in Russia back then. So those were my favorite movies and shows about Russia that can be available right now on America's most popular streaming services. And I hope that they are also available worldwide. It's just that I'm in America, that's what I know. I would also love to hear what are some of your favorite movies and shows about Russia that maybe you can recommend to other people. So please feel free to share that in the comments section. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. If you haven't already, hit subscribe to get more information about Russian culture, history, and art. Thank you.